Hey guys, I'm Jacinta Robinson and welcome to the Fearlss podcast, where I interview athletes who achieve incredible things. Today's guest is an expert in the health industry. She's a nutritionist and a sports dietitian and develops her own recipes. This all came about when she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and she wanted to figure out how food affected the body. I'd like to welcome Claudia Cramer. Welcome to the podcast, Claudia.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on board. I've seen for, I think it's a couple years now, I've been watching all the food that you make and it looks so delicious. It looks so tasty, and I think I haven't started cooking yet, but I may be inspired within the next couple of months. We are looking at changing up our food, so I have to drudge in and see what recipes that you got. Do you have that regularly on Instagram or somewhere that people can look at your recipes?
Yep. So if they're on Instagram, they're generally linked to my website, so www.ccdietitian.com.
Yeah.
But sometimes, Instagram, it's hard to make the recipes look good. I don't know if you ever tried to take photos at night. It doesn't work very well.
Yeah, it doesn't. There's no lighting.
Yeah, you're like, oh, this is a great meal, but I can't take a photo of it. So they're generally on my Instagram or linked to my website.
Oh, cool. Do you know the other day I made breakfast and I was like, oh, I'm going to be simple and make oats, and I put blueberries in and I was like, oh, okay, it's now purple. Yeah. So then I was like, oh, I want to put a little bit of protein in there, and it looked so gross. And I was like, I am not taking a photo of that. It looked like snot with lumps. I was like, oh, yuck, people will not be inspired to eat that. But it was amazing. It tasted so yummy.
Sometimes I do that. I'll have my meal that I'll take a photo of.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, this is how I actually eat it. And I'll just mush it all together and it just looks nothing the same. But, it's still tasty.
Yeah. So tell us about, how did you get into, what inspired you to get into the health industry?
So I sort of not fell into it by accident, but it wasn't my plan at all. Mm-hmm. So when I left school, I had no idea what I was going to study, but I knew I wanted to go to uni.
Yeah.
And so I came from a small country town and did a year out of school to get some money so I could move to Brisbane to go to uni.
What town were you from?
From Dalby.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's a small town.
It is small.
Yeah. Do you know where it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, grew up there, and then I guess I had no idea what I was doing. I was thinking, law, I don't know. I just had an idea of what I thought would be cool. I'm like, I want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I want to be this, that. Anyway, so I was still thinking about what to do, and at this point, so from school, I noticed coming out of school and getting a full-time job for the whole year, I just noticed that I had really poor, mental health. So not poor as in full-on depression or that sort of stuff, but I just noticed that I was working shift work, as a barista and at a bar in the evening, and I was eating just bar food and soft drinks and McDonald's, and just I didn't have any interest in my food, and I just noticed that I was feeling terrible, really. I'd be drinking on the weekends. I was only 18, so that's probably a little bit normal for that age, but I just got a little bit sick of it, and I started researching what food, what link that has to your mental health and how you can make yourself feel better with food. Mm-hmm. And so I started a little food diary, Monday morning I'm having Turkish toast or whatever I wrote down.
Yeah.
And then I just started getting interested in it, and I started following people like BioLane about macronutrients and just learning about how certain things could make you feel. So I was really interested in about not so much macro splits, but if I keep my protein high, do I feel good? If I manipulate this and that, how do I feel? So I started doing that, and then when I moved to Brisbane and got into uni with a different degree, my housemate at the time said, why don't you study health? You're always into it and might be the way to go. So I transferred into a Bachelor of Exercise Science here at UQ, and then that sort of just started me on learning about the body and just furthering how you could make yourself feel good and how your body works. It's just so interesting. And then a few years later, I moved into the Masters of Dietetics at UQ, and that was sort of cementing everything that I love. So it's more about the body, more about bringing clients into it and how you can apply nutrition science to different people and different groups. And then you move into more hospital and clinical care. And then from there, I noticed that it was it was awesome, and I love clinical and I love hospital work. It's just fascinating, but it wasn't what sort of lit me up, what didn't really light my fire. So I moved into a sports dietetics qualification, and I did that, and that was when I was like, yeah, this is really cool. So I met some really nice people. The course was awesome, and since then I've been using it with everyday clients, and just learning more and more. There's so much to learn, but it's a really, really good place to be. And it just opens so many doors in terms of like jobs and people you get to work with and things you can do. And it brings all of my loves of things like food and sport and exercise and people wanting to be healthy. It brings it all into one place.
Yeah. And so over this period of time, since you've been in through a few avenues, what have you noticed is the biggest mistake with food?
I think people overcomplicate their nutrition. So even using myself as an example, when I noticed that I've tried and failed with my diet many, many times. And I think the biggest issue was I was trying to get it perfect the first time. So I'd say, okay, I'd go from eating, takeaway a few times a week. And then I'd go, okay, on Monday, I'm only eating chicken and broccoli for the whole week. And if I don't eat it, I'm a failure and I'm guilty and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I just put so much pressure onto getting it right. And, why can't I stick to it this time and all that sort of stuff, which I see people do, like that all or nothing approach. So I think for myself and for people, they often try to get it right, perfectly right the first time. And it wasn't until years later when with my particular diet, I took all the restrictions off. I took all the, diets and this and that. And I just said, okay, I'll focus on one thing for this week. And I feel like I've never, ever had a day on or a day off because every day is so balanced and I just have no restrictions around food whatsoever. So I think people make the mistake of treating it like it's I have to do this by this time and not looking at it as a lifelong thing because it's never going to stop, right? So if that mentality isn't right about being on a diet or being off a diet, then
Yeah, I think sometimes people get wrapped up in this. A diet means you have to do it for a period of time, then you can go back to your normal eating habits. And I think trying to wrap your head around that it is like a lifestyle, like you said, can be sometimes complicated because you think, oh no, I'm going to miss out on having my favorite chocolate or whatever it may be. How do you teach people like to have a balanced diet? Like, how do you know personally yourself, what do I eat? Like I've had avo on toast and tomatoes and mushrooms, say. How do you know what to have next?
It's a little bit tricky because it's that fine line between, yes, we can work out, via calculations how much you should be eating and what this looks like in terms of protein, carbs and fats. But realistically, how do you get the everyday person to then do that? Like if they're not competing, they're not going to carry around scales. And most people don't carry around scales to weigh things perfectly.
Yeah.
And then even then that might be, the calculation's not 100%. So it might be out by say 20%. So I think it's more about, I like to teach people about macronutrients in a broader range. So I would say, think about what protein is at your next meal. So I find that people as in probably women mostly, do lack enough protein in their diet. So I like to just say, for your 3 main meals, just think about what protein source you're having. And that might just be adding 2 eggs to your avo toast or whatever, even vegan or vegetarian options as well. So like chickpeas or lentils, but what's your protein option at that main meal? And then thinking about the rest. So maybe having a few cups of vegetables or salad but I like to aim for protein, and it gets people thinking about macronutrients in a different way without being too specific about it.
And you're saying protein is important, but why? Like, why is it, like, especially on a vegan diet? Because like in vegan terms, protein is like kind of minor because there's so much carbohydrates and stuff. So can you explain a little bit further on what you mean by that? So
having enough protein, I guess a lot of people I see tend to be more in the body composition manipulation type of game. So they're looking to, put on some muscle or lose some body fat. So while I'm not saying we need excess protein, just having enough. So some people might only be having, say, 20 grams per day, which we might not say is enough for optimum muscle synthesis or keeping you full or just general processes in your body. So having enough without being in excess is something that I like to focus on.
And how, like, for everyone listening now, how do they know what is enough?
It depends on your body, obviously. I would ballpark it, let's say around 100 grams for a female. It's really, really hard to know because it could be what's your goal, what's your exercise, what's your activity, what's your BMR, height,
is there a certain like percent, like 1.2 grams per body weight, or does that like, because when the bodybuilding industry,
Yeah.
they say like you've got to have this much per body weight. Would you say that as well, or?
Yeah, it does work. There are calculators you can look up online that sort of take into account your muscle mass and that sort of stuff, and it's a good ballpark. But yeah, I like to stick around that sort of mark. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously, because I'm vegan,
Yes.
tell us about, what are your thoughts about a vegan diet? Because there is like as well, and the other thing that I want to speak about is like keto, because that's new and coming. And from what I understand, ketosis is only meant to be shortly lived. But I'd love to explore. Tell me about vegan first.
Okay, vegan. The things I love about vegan, I love that it's an abundance of plant-based foods. I love that it's high in micronutrients. I love the variety and of all the plants. So you're getting so many different types of fibers with like nuts and seeds and all the different plants you can get. That being said, there are some vegan diets which don't have that. So they might be relying on processed vegan foods or not having that abundance of plant-based foods. So I have nothing against being or choosing to eat in a vegan way, and I think you can thrive on it. Yeah.
And then like, because I think with being vegan, you're right, like you have the wrong vegan eating, and then you have the right vegan eating, and like you said, like all the extra meats, and I think it's going to grow now because it's a trending word. But I think if you can roll down the way of having more plants and fiber, I think that is personally, I believe that's a great way to be. And with keto, like with being keto, explain what your thoughts about that. Like, do you think that it is something that you've got to teach it's good for your body to get into learning using fat as a energy source, and do you think that it's a short-term thing, or do you think you can be that for a long time?
It really depends. I personally don't think it should be a long-term thing. Let's say having under 20 grams of carbohydrates per day, purely because you might be missing out on fiber. So maybe starchy vegetables like sweet potato and all those like nourishing foods with great micronutrients. So yeah, ketosis is forcing your body to not use, you don't have any carbohydrates coming in, so you're using an alternate fuel source. There is some research that it might help endurance athletes, but that being said, you need to be adapted. So you can't train one way and then race a different way. You'd need to be being in a ketosis state that whole time. And my only issue with that is just the balance of your social life and life in general. How can you go out in the weekend and have a beer or a burger? You might throw yourself out of ketosis. So it's not so much it's more of is it realistic for the everyday person to have to do that because that potential endurance benefit? And I think from what I've read, it's only around 5% benefit in endurance athletes. So if people like to do it, that's fine. Make sure you're sort of under the guide of a healthcare practitioner, or have someone helping you, because it might not be for everyone. If you've got some clinical issues or some sort of disease which might not work for you, then it might not be right. So it is a bit of a tricky one, but yeah, I like to focus on enough fiber and the social idea as well. And
with ketosis, you have to be continuous. Hey, is that what you're saying? Like you can't just do Monday to Friday and then the weekend blow it off?
Yeah. So the idea of, I guess, ketosis is so you've got no more carbs coming down, through the pathway. So you're forcing your body to use the carbs they have, and then it goes to the next fuel source, which can be fats and eventually proteins. But therefore, the idea, the rationale behind it is that you're getting more energy or more bang for your buck using fats as opposed to carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are a quick acting energy source and the fats are a bigger, I guess, more energy yielding source, which might help endurance. Yeah. So that's how it works.
Yeah. So in programming for clients that are like your sports, like whatever it may be, like soccer or endurance running and or weight training, do you find that that's completely different to the general public? And the reason why I ask this is because I see a lot of people, they're like, all right, I'm going to get fit, and they'll go on a bodybuilding website and they'll follow that nutrition plan. What is it completely different, the way that obviously athletes eat and the general public trying to just get a little bit healthier?
The main difference I see is that athletes have a huge energy expenditure, which means they need to eat a lot more than the average person to maintain their weight or to perform at a high level. So the athletes that I have seen or do see in my private practice, they are severely under eating. So they might not understand that their body requires X amount of energy to maintain and then to perform well. So the main difference is that they need to eat a lot more. And then I guess another thing to think about is in some circumstances, like with athletes, and say you've got like a cyclist or a triathlete, you might need to use things like the gels and things that have really quick energy, whereas in the general public, they might not need these things, because obviously if you're performing at a high level and you're on the cycle leg of a triathlon, you need that energy as quick as you can. So you might need it from pure sugar or honey or whatever you can get that's easy to carry with you. Whereas the everyday person doing a 45-minute gym session, they're not going to carry those gels with them. So I think it's about the sport specifically, or how quickly they need that energy, what's their energy expenditure, what kind of breaks do they get. It's a little bit more like problem solving, whereas the everyday person, it might not be as detailed, because it might not be as strict, we need this pre-workout, we need this post-workout, that sort of stuff.
And you just said like athletes undereat. Why though? Like they're in the industry of being healthy. Like why?
Well, good question. And I would have thought that athletes would take their nutrition, not more important, but as important as their training. I like nutrition, so I'll be careful what I say. But some athletes that I've seen don't really see the link between what they're eating and their performance and their output. And once they get that right, it's a major factor in impacting their performance, because obviously if you're fueling your body correctly with the proper pre-workout or post-workout foods and then having enough throughout the day, it can really help your recovery in the gym or whatever your session is, can help your mental health, like if you're eating enough and getting a lot of variety of food. So yeah, that's really important as well.
Yeah, because like even I know, like when I increase my running throughout, like as I'm coming up to an event, and I'm feeling like, I feel like maybe I'm drinking too much water, and it's actually that I'm lacking carbs.
Yep.
And I tested it, and then I ate more carbs the next week, and I was like, I feel energized, like I feel okay. And I think it's in the mind, like you don't want to eat too much because you're worried of putting on weight, but then you want to perform, and it's like, what's that fine line?
Yeah, it's tricky. And one thing that we often, because obviously when you study nutrition, you think, oh, this is what this person should do exactly. But when you meet the athletes you're working with, it's not always that easy. Like it's not just saying you have to do this. They might say, hey, I'm on the road those 2 days. What can I do? What's really easy to grab and go from wherever? And often they might undereat because they're training so much during the day, they can't physically get enough in to replenish, your glycogen stores or your energy stores. So they might be doing a session in the morning and then a skill set in the afternoon, or a recovery, whatever it is, and they might not just have the time. So it's just those little problem solving things as well that makes it a little bit harder with the athlete, just because they've got so many other things they're thinking about too. So, coaches and different disciplines they're seeing, but their nutrition needs to be thought about at least, and then hopefully worked on to help them perform.
And for you personally, like I know that you are training in the gym, so like what do you eat like day to day? Like I know like you have Instagram stuff. Is that what you eat, or is that?
No, it is. So I am probably a lifelong guinea pig, I guess, on with different diets or styles, and I'm always changing. I think that's a really important thing that I've learned from listening, to podcasts myself and just the more research. One of the most important things is variety of different foods in your diet. So you shouldn't be eating the same thing every day for the whole year. You're not going to have that variety for your gut, and your gut bacteria needs different types of foods at different times. So in the summer, you might be having more fruits and smoothies, and then moving into winter, you might be having more like stews or slow cooked things that are just more warming. So I find that I go with the seasons a little bit, subconsciously. So probably more smoothies in the summer, more fruits, and then in the winter, I like more slow cooked things, warming foods. But yeah, things that I have on my Instagram, I definitely eat.
Yeah, because it looks amazing.
Thank you.
It's just, I'm not the chef in this household. Like my partner, she makes all of that stuff.
I just need a photographer to help me take photos. That's the hardest bit.
Yeah, so all photographers out there listening.
I need your help.
So like, because I think also with trying to eat healthy, like I think lots of people say to me, it's too much cooking. And like you're saying variety. So how does someone get variety in their diet when they're working lots or they've got a family or whatever it may be? What do you recommend people like that?
For instance, just an easy thing, obviously not overcomplicating it like I mentioned before. Something that I do, if I'm meal prepping and it's, say, a protein, so I might do, say I'm doing a really easy prep and I've got no time, I might do protein, tofu, falafel, and maybe a meat. And then I'll cook those up. And then as the vegetable bit, I might do, one type of stir fry with onion, garlic, spices, and even frozen veggies, just greens. And then I might do another stir fry, which is a different, vegetable mix. So it doesn't need to be everything is different all the time. It's just having some variety, because some diets, like you mentioned previously, like a more typical bodybuilder diet, which I definitely did when I was younger, oats and then eggs, and then this is what you had, and it just had no variety. And so that can sometimes not help your gut bacteria, because it needs that diversity. So even just thinking of little ways, even if it is frozen vegetables like I do at times, just what's a little bit different that your gut can use.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. Like have the protein, the fiber, the fats, and how do you balance that throughout the 3 meals?
Yeah.
But then slightly changing it up and be inspired by other people's.
Even like I'll do my base, so my protein, and then I might have a different mix of vegetables, and then my carbs could be as easy as a sweet potato versus a normal potato, and then, I don't know, parsnip or pumpkin, and then as a fat source like a hummus or a pesto, just little things you can do that doesn't make it the same thing every day.
And would you ever recommend people having like pre-made food, like chef, like, when they get the meals that I'm talking about, the frozen meals, would you recommend that?
Yeah, I think whatever works for you and your circumstance. So say you don't mind spending a little bit more money on those types of foods, then go for it. If they have good variety, and over time, I'm not sure what the longevity is of having those meals, because I haven't done it or read anything about it, but I know from previously I've tried it, and just it was amazing to have it ready. Those days that you just couldn't be bothered. Like you just get home, you want to go to the gym, and it's 8 o'clock, and you don't know what to have. So it's underestimated how good it is to have something there ready to go. So if it's that ready-made meals or takeaway, I would always say ready-made meals.
Yeah, at least the serving size. It's not blowing it out of proportion.
And there's some really tasty ones, and they're good diversity, as long as you're not relying on it every day for your whole life, the same meal.
Yeah. And also, like, in saying that, because obviously you've had lots of clients, what is like supplements that you would recommend? Let's say without doing like post-workout, pre-workout, what are common things that you see lacking in people's diets that you think that they should be incorporating?
I only use supplements if it's really needed. I'm an advocate for a protein supplement. I personally use a plant-based one. I have it every day just to assist me with getting enough.
What brand is it?
Am I allowed to say?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, me too.
What flavour?
Chai latte is the best.
Oh, no way. I've rotated through all of them.
What's your favourite?
Probably coconut milk.
Oh, I haven't had that one
yet. It's really good. So I don't use it as in with a shaker and milk or whatever. I have it in a little protein pudding. So it sounds really weird, but it's the most delicious thing. I'll go serve of protein with a little bit of water, and then I'll add a fair bit of coconut yogurt, and then add like seeds or granola, and it makes like a little dessert. So that's the way I do mine. Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, back to your question.
Yeah.
So protein I see is a good one to recommend if it's needed. I often just think it's an easy way to get it in, and it can be really tasty. So I use mine more as a bit of a sweet treat, because it can be a little bit sweeter. So I have it as in like a after dinner dessert kind of thing, and it's just assisting me to reach my protein with those amino acids in it.
I noticed like being vegan, like it is the best thing.
Yeah.
To get that ready done, no carbs. It just is a great supplement.
Yeah, and it often makes you feel better if you are lacking in protein, or you just know that it's got those things in it, like leucine as well, which is good for muscle synthesis if you need. Other supplements, I'm not a huge advocate for heaps of them, but sometimes, like say with a vegan diet, you might be lacking in creatine, because it can be found, it is found in, meats. So that might be something to look for.
Why do you think that's important? Because like I've tried creatine and like, yeah, great. It works on my performance. I'm faster, I'm stronger, but man, I feel blown out. And I know that it's like, I just feel like I wouldn't want to incorporate that into my daily routine?
Well, it depends, I guess, because you do put on, like, I guess, water weight with the creatine and loading and different stuff. So it is how you feel. If you feel terrible, then obviously I wouldn't recommend a supplement. But for some people, it might be okay for them. And if they are very performance based, they might not mind, but, you know, the little bit of discomfort to get that performance enhancement. I don't really recommend any other supplements as a general statement. It just depends one-on-one. So some people might like BCAAs, but I don't really think it's needed always, because it can just depends what your goal is, obviously. Yeah.
And then what about, like, because people will be like, oh, you need fish oil, you need vitamin C, you need B12s. Like, do you think any of that is important, or do you feel like the variety, like if you're constantly changing your diet, you're going to get all that through there?
Good question. So personally, when I've done my blood tests and things, because I'm always checking to see what I'm doing, even though I eat a variety of food, I'm deficient in some things like vitamin D, and I'm from, you know, the sunniest state in Australia.
It's like humidity,
so,
100%.
I know, so I just avoid the sun. But yeah, so it's interesting you say that, because it's hard to know. You might think, oh, I'm eating a variety of food and I'm a dietitian, I should be on top of those things. But even myself, I'm deficient in some things like vitamin D and calcium. So it might be needed to supplement, but then again, I wouldn't always just blanket some things without being properly tested. So B12 is an important one for being on a vegan diet. Can help with your energy production, and vitamin D is really important if you're not getting enough sun. I think it's about 10 minutes per day they recommend to get enough. But even saying that, I'm still deficient. So there are some things that you might need to supplement with. Fish oils can be good if you don't really have anything in your diet that's, you know, those fatty acids, EPA, DHA. Like salmon's quite good, but it might be important to get some sort of source if you're vegan, like having nice olive oils or hemp oils to get those fat sources in.
I love having hemp seeds. Like, it just is like everything in there, and then I don't have to worry about it. But there's like this, like I hear all the time, like you need to have the fish oils for the bones, and you need to have like the calcium for like the strengthening of the bones. But then I hear other arguments saying like you have milk for calcium, but then there's like a toxic process that happens when it goes into the body, it extracts the calcium what have you found?
I still think it's an individual basis. It's really hard to say. I watched something recently that talked about calcium and what are the pros and cons, calcium from milk and the pros and cons. And it sort of said, if you have milk, that's good. It can give you some calcium, but there are other ways, like, you know, green leafy vegetables and things like that. So it doesn't need to be from milk per se, but that's one way to get it. And what this was saying, what I was watching, is that it can be good if you need the energy. So it's not an alternative to water to hydrate you, but it can be good for those people who need extra energy. So like younger people or people growing or athletes, for example. So it was sort of half whether you need milk for calcium, because there's other ways to get it.
Yeah. And like you were saying before, like the gut, like, you know, there's heaps of studies done about the gut being our second brain. And what do you think, how is that linked to mental health? Like, what's your personal opinion? Like, obviously you've experienced a little bit. How important is the nutrition to get that, so that we are feeling better about ourselves and we don't get into depression? And
I think it's very, very important. So personally speaking, from what I've done to improve my gut health, when I've focused on my gut health for the last few years, I've noticed a massive improvement in my mental health.
How did you know that your gut health wasn't right?
Well, actually, I developed an autoimmune disease when I was going through uni. So I was just stressed out and drinking a lot of coffee and wearing down my adrenal glands and a bit stressed out. So I actually got an autoimmune disease in my digestive system. And so from then,
what was that called?
Ulcerative colitis.
Okay, I've heard of that. Yeah.
So I'm very well managed now. It's almost 100% fine with no medication, just through my diet and lifestyle. But it's taken me years to do that. And I feel like I'm at a place where everything I do needs to be working on my gut, because that's, I believe, the source of the, of my autoimmune disease. So the things that I eat, it's not really to satisfy me, it's more to work on my gut, because that will help me in the long term. So with my mental health and my autoimmune disease, keeping it under control.
And how do you educate people to be, don't have that food, like don't go out and have McDonald's or KFC. How do you teach people that like having these leafy green vegetables and broccoli and whatever it might be, it doesn't taste as amazing, but how do you wrap your head around that you have to, like it's better for you to eat that to help you mentally when you're in that state?
It's less about sort of preaching it. I let people try and find it out for themselves. So even in my personal life with friends and family, I'm never going to say don't eat that or don't get takeaway. But if they do, I go, how do you feel? You know, do you feel good? And they normally say no. So it's more about just assisting them to just think about it, because they're most likely going to make the link. And when they are eating more takeaway foods, they might feel a bit different or not as good. And then as opposed to a nice homemade meal. And you mentioned previously with the not tasting as good, I would not eat anything that tastes bland ever. But I've managed to make vegetables taste good, and it's about making things, you know, make yourself want to eat that. So it doesn't have to be, you know, just greens with no seasoning and just no taste. It's about how do you add spices and flavors and make it, not trick yourself, but make sure you're having enough plant-based food that's still really, really tasty. So that's been my idea to do for the last few years, and I follow a lot of plant-based people on Instagram, or a few, and their meals look amazing. It doesn't feel like they're just eating bland vegetables, but it's about how can we make this look appealing, taste good, and really easy to do.
I think that's a misconception, conception. Like people say to me, "Oh, vegan, you just eat lettuce leaves."
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, if you ate vegan, like food, like when you go to a restaurant and it's more of a classier restaurant, obviously they're going to have delicious food, and you go there and you're like, this is vegan.
Yeah.
And I think people have this perception of that you can't make it delicious. And if you do have that perception, I think it's about educating yourself that you can use different flavors, and some things go really well together and just taste better than what it does with some junky sort of stuff. Like I even remember, because I used to be addicted to cookie dough and like chocolate and chips, and like a hairdresser days, it was like, oh my God. But like even like just the simple change in quality of chocolate was huge. And I used to play backwards and forwards. So I'd have chocolate that was from Woolworths or Coles or whatever, and I'd be like, okay, this feels oily in the gut, and I'd feel like a little bit down. And then I'd have a more quality chocolate, and I'd only have a little bit, and I felt really satisfied. And I think you're right. Like I think it's about trying to get, I would say, top quality foods. And if you can afford organic usually tastes a lot better. And then that way you can make it more of a inviting meal for yourself and for everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's a hard one. Even myself, when I went through uni, you're trying to, you know, not spend as much and just get the cheapest thing you can. But as I've gotten older and obviously developing an autoimmune disease, I'm really focusing on spending a little bit more to get that quality food. So although it is a little bit of a hit for your pay, but it is worth it. Like you just, when you spend some, or you go to a nicer place, and it just can be so good to go home and just look at this, you know, have a really inviting meal. And it is really good to spend a little bit more on your produce if you can. Not everyone can, but just sometimes it does make the difference.
I think we end up spending that anyway, because I remember buying like salads from Woolworths, and then I'd be like, I am not eating that. Like I would buy it, I'm gonna be healthy. But it was disgusting. I'd go buy something else, and I end up spending just as much money. So I feel like investing a little bit into food does pay off, really. So like I train a lot of women, and they have problems with bloating. What have you experienced? Why?
It can happen for a lot of reasons. Some can be, say, intolerance or allergies, but that's a bit of an avenue to go down, because you do need to get tested, or at least have someone helping you to assist with what that might be. So some people might get bloated by certain foods, which might be in the FODMAP group. If you've heard of that diet, it's kind of reducing things that are high in FODMAP to try and reduce those symptoms. So things such as like onion and starchy vegetables, but even not just food, things that people don't often think about that I like to bring up are sweeteners and like your soft drinks and what else is going into your food. So chewing gum is a big one that I find that people...
Yeah. When I was doing my bodybuilding comp, it was painful. I didn't even realize.
So just little things like that, and some sweeteners that are put into like protein bars might upset some people and they get just really distended and uncomfortable. But even just looking at the extras that you're having, if it's not the food that you're eating, just what other things are in your day. So do you have sweeteners in your coffee or tea, or what's actually happening? And sometimes that can be helpful to remove, or just try and see if it assists.
Yeah, like a playing around and testing.
Yeah, just have maybe one day with it, no chewing gum, or if you chew a lot of chewing gum, or one day changing your type of sweetener from a sweetener to a honey, or just seeing how it goes. Yeah.
Do you think gluten plays a role in this as well?
It depends. If you're celiac, obviously you can't have any gluten. Some people might be gluten intolerant, but it's an area which is a bit hard to diagnose, I guess, without getting the proper testing. So I'd probably recommend, if you are thinking that gluten might be an issue, to get the proper testing with that. Yeah.
Do you know if it develops like randomly, or is it something that you're born with?
The gluten?
Yeah.
If you're celiac, it's an autoimmune disease, so you are born with it, and sometimes it takes a long time to find that's the culprit, because you might not be educated to know what gluten is or what food it is in. But other things, it really depends. I'm not 100% sure about how quickly that develops, the gluten intolerance, if you are intolerant. So probably best to just get that tested if you are thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I watched this documentary called What the Wheat, and it was talking about how we are all of a sudden developing all of these conditions, and it was because of mass production of wheat, and the ground didn't have the nutrients in it, and so we're growing stuff without the nutrients, and then we're eating obviously all this extra calories without all of obviously nutrients. And it was talking about that's how it was developed.
Yeah, but an interesting one that I've heard is that because gluten-free, not to say that it's trendy, but there's a lot more products now to help the celiac community with what they can have in their diet. And if people reduce or take out gluten, say for no medical reason, then if they introduce it again, they might feel like they're gluten intolerant because they haven't had it for a long time. So removing it without... If you want to test for yourself, that's fine. But just thinking about that, it might be that if you bring it back in, you might not be celiac or gluten sensitive. It could just be because you haven't had it for so long.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one. It probably needs the correct medical professionals to help you with that one.
Yeah. And Claudia, I'd love to know your advice on fasting. Like that to me is like a trending thing. There's like the 5 and 2, there's the 16 and 8. Do you know anything about fasting, and do you recommend it?
So I've tried it before, obviously as a guinea pig on my own nutrition. I felt good. I found it really hard because obviously it's just a habit to wake up and I would eat before I trained. So I'd be missing out on that. And then that sometimes impacted my training in the morning. So I guess it depends on what your situation is. If you're an athlete, the athletes that I've seen have such a high energy expenditure, it can be so hard to intermittent fast and then get your calories in the day. It's almost impossible. Let's say you've trained in the morning and then you're not eating till 12 midday. How are you going to get 4,000 calories in the next 4 hours? So it's almost impossible. And if you're training in the morning, will that impact your performance? Are you fatigued during your session, and then is that you're not getting the benefits from that? So I guess the idea, or I've listened to some podcasts recently about intermittent fasting, like one from Thinking Nutrition, that's Dr. Tim Crow, and he just talked about how there was no difference in terms of weight loss if you have intermittent fasting versus just a calorie deficit longer term, but there may be some benefits in cellular health. So he kind of goes into detail about what that is, but for general weight loss, he said that, or suggested that there was no difference.
Yeah, because I know like when you are in a fasting, your hormones, like obviously your body's not digesting, so it's working on your hormones and everything else that needs to be fixed. So it'd be interesting to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, it was really informative. But I think that's an area that's obviously people do it for many reasons, like even religious reasons. So there's lots more research coming out about that and other potential health benefits that may not be just weight loss. So he suggested that it might assist with like Alzheimer's and things like that in the brain, maybe reducing inflammation. So there might be other avenues that aren't just body composition wise.
And what about like detox diets? Like when people do juice fast, no joke, Elise and I did a juice fast and we lasted, I think, one day. And I think I personally believe because there was so much sugar in the juice and we're not used to that. And we were headaches, we felt like we were going to vomit. And then we've spoken to people and they're like, oh, you're meant to purge, you're meant to feel like this. And I have no idea what's the right thing. Or
Personally, I don't do detox protocols on myself or my clients purely because it's a short-term not even solution, I guess. What's the point of it really?
Yeah.
It really depends. Like say, it's good to have a certain amount of time. Like let's say the next 4 days I'm going to eat healthier, but does that mean I have to do a juice fast? Probably not. So if you're more focused on, getting quality food, getting quality sleep, water, getting enough fiber and micronutrients, your body's going to do that for you. There are cases where, let's say your liver might need some help to detox because that's its job. Whereas, it might be overloaded with like synthetic hormones or things from the environment. So there may be instances where you could assist with herbs or things to help that liver detox, but things that are only short term, I don't personally think are, the way to go.
Yeah, well, we totally didn't like it. We were like, no,
and also,
not again.
I love my food. So
yeah.
As much as, it sounds appealing to, juice fast and that sort of stuff. Your body already does it. So just focus on making healthier choices that you can actually sustain, because you're not going to every year do a juice fast because that's the reason you feel good. Like you should be making other changes during the year that you can actually sustain.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke before about caffeine. Like I think this is a huge thing to address. People believe in even weight loss or performance wise that they need to have caffeine to help them perform. I personally believe that if you want that little bit of an edge to your performance, as in like you want to run faster, it's like a race, then caffeine could help. But I think it's a catch-22. Like the other side of the caffeine is the adrenal fatigue. What's your experience with this?
Well, personally, my personal experience when I was drinking too much coffee and then I ended up with an autoimmune disease. But I was drinking probably like 6 a day. So I think my body was just so run down that I was susceptible to other things. So that was my personal experience. But if you are relying on coffee, yes, it can be great, but there's that point where too much is not good. So yes, you can have a little bit in the morning. So I recommend if you have your coffee before lunch, that's the best because you're not interrupting your sleep at the other end of the day. So just giving yourself that productivity, or if you need that little edge in the morning, and then you still can have a nice sleep and relax in the afternoon. Yes, it does have some performance benefits, but you also need to make sure that you've trained with caffeine. So there's no point being an athlete or a person who doesn't have any coffee and then race day they have a coffee and it's just too much and they might feel sick, and so you need to make sure you use it wisely. Also not rely on it, because I often see people who have coffees all day just to get through that next few hours of work or whatever it is, and then they might have pre-workout with caffeine at the gym and they're just overdoing it. And that can be not good for your body either, because it's just relying on external stimulants. And so that's why I recommend just either cutting it down or having it in the morning. And then I've been trying to have some caffeine-free days just to rely on my natural energy production, so I don't always feel like, okay, I have to have a coffee and that's the only way I can work.
And do you think people have so many coffees because they're not wanting to eat and they feel like, I won't have as much calories, so I'll have a coffee and it'll keep me fuller? Only speaking from experience.
Okay, yes. Good question. I think it personally sometimes from personal experience, it can suppress your appetite. I think because you sort of feel a bit more energetic and a bit more wide and productive. But then some clients I see are eating quite well, and then I ask about caffeine and they might say, oh, I only have 3 per day. I go, that's all right. And then we delve a little bit deeper and it's, the 16-ounce coffee with syrup and 2 sugars. And so then that's probably 300 calories each. So there's your extra calories in the day, and that might be why you're not losing weight. So it's not so much about the caffeine as opposed to what you're having it with. Like, is it a big coffee frappe, or, you know, what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that also goes into it as well, because people might be thinking, I'm having a coffee so I don't eat, but actually that's probably a snack in terms of amount of calories.
Yeah, because like I went into the trap of having 6 a day, and then I got to a point like 7:30 at night. Like I had too much, obviously, and it was making me sleepy. As soon as I had it, my body was like, time, like just please go to sleep. And I'd be like trying to stay awake. Yeah. But then I did realize that I wasn't eating enough. And then when I started eating more, cutting it out, it was friggin' hard to cut it out. But once I did, then it was like the opposite. I completely cut it out for a month, and I had one coffee, and I could feel it was like this complete adrenaline like I've never felt before. And I was like, holy hell, what was I doing to my body prior to this?
It can be quite draining. Like I went a year without coffee, and I just went decaf, and I felt amazing. Like I was just getting up, not tired, not feeling sluggish, but I'm someone who really, really enjoys coffee. So I'm going to have that in my diet, but in moderation. So I'm trying now to have caffeine-free days, and I only have one in the morning if I'm having a coffee, just working on still having it, still enjoying it, using the benefits of it, maybe for work or as a pre-workout, but then still not letting it affect me, as in if I'm having too much, you might feel like unproductive or jittery or anxious, and then it might affect you that way. So still getting the benefits, but also taking a break when I need to.
Yeah. And so like, let's just say that you had a coffee, right? And then you went and did a workout. Obviously you're going to go harder, faster, lift more weights, whatever it may be. How important is it to have something post a workout? Because I know myself, if I leave it an hour or 2 hours, I'm stuffed for the day. Like I feel lethargic, and I'm like, I have no energy. And then that, I think, was where I fell into the trap of having another cup. And then as well, I won't eat. And yeah. So how important is it for like a post-workout to replenish the stores?
Yeah, it's quite important. So for the everyday athlete, or the everyday gym goer, I like to really cement the pre and post-workout nutrition. So pre-workout, you want something that's a bit higher GI, so glycemic index, you can get that energy.
Even if they're training at like 5 in the morning?
Yeah, I like to, from personal experience, and also it gives you an extra store of glycogen, which is what your body will use first. Like say you're doing a high intensity workout, that's probably more important to have that high GI carbohydrate. So even if it's half a piece of fruit or half a banana, it can give you that even mental edge to help you with the session. And then post-workout, you want to look at protein and carbohydrate again to replenish the stores you've just used in the session. So especially if your goal is muscle gain, it's really important to have that pre-post workout to help replenish what you've just done and to help that recovery process.
Yeah, otherwise the body's just going to start eating itself to replenish it to
eventually,
a degree.
Probably not after one session, but it's a good idea to have a good routine around your workout. So not just the workout is really important in itself for, gains or for whatever you're trying to do, but it's how can you use the nutrition to help cement that workout? So how can you get even more benefit from it?
And would you say the same for running? Because I know a lot of people go run on an empty stomach because they feel like they're going to vomit. Yeah,
that's a bit tough if you're in a sport that you might feel like your stomach moving around, like if you're a swimmer, or sometimes you might not be able to have something pre-workout. It just sort of is working with the client, how does this go? Try this. Did you feel better? Did you perform better? Because sometimes they do perform better in the training session, which therefore may improve their performance. But other times they might have something and they feel really sick, and it really impacted them because they felt like, they're bloated, or they might need to go to the bathroom. So it's about working with the client to ultimately improve their performance or whatever their goal is.
So it's like testing and
little
seeing
bit.
what works.
Yeah, it's really good to have an open conversation with say you're seeing a dietitian, or if you're not, just having an open conversation around all that. I didn't feel very good with that. So what's another idea? Because obviously everything's not going to work for every person. So it's about how can we try different things, trial and error. I felt really good with this. I felt really terrible with that. So what can we do?
Maximize the results.
Yeah. Because it's all about give and take. You're not going to do anything perfectly, but if you can make small changes that can help you assist in doing whatever you want to do, that's the goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, or tell us, what is your mission in life? Like you've gone down so many avenues. What's your end goal?
I don't know if I can put it into words what my actual end goal is, because I just every day I do what I love, which is, food, talking to people, helping people, make better choices and feel better. But I think everything comes down to when I was younger and I was just feeling so terrible, and I made these small changes, and I spent the last 6-7 years tweaking my diet, and I just know how amazing I feel now. So I think my goal is to help people to do what I did, which is make themselves, you are in control of your health, and you can, no matter what comes around, like if you get an autoimmune disease like me, you can still work towards it, work through it, and you can do things with your nutrition. So I think helping people realize that you don't have to feel, let's say, not anxious and depressed, but you don't have to feel not self-confident, and there's things that you can do to help yourself feel better.
Yeah. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to to want to help these people. I think it's like fast tracking their progress, because you've known from experience.
Yep.
And would you say nutrition would be the most important if, like, let's just say I'm me over here, I'm doing whatever I want, party, eating, whatever. Do you think nutrition is the first thing you should go to change in your habits? Or do you think it should be walking? Or do you think it should be sleeping more or hydration? Like, what do you think?
Good question. Is not nutrition, actually. It's probably sleep. So to me, sleep is a non-negotiable. So I think I told you this morning, I had a 12-hour nap. I didn't mean to sleep 12 hours, but my body just needed it.
Yeah.
So to me, sleep is the one thing that you shouldn't skimp on. So if you're having a 5-6 hour sleep, how can you possibly make up for that during the day? Like, how can you perform at your best? You're more likely going to rely on caffeine to help you get through the day. And while it's not possible for everyone just to say, oh, just sleep more, if you can, make it a priority, because obviously you might be like a shift worker, or you might be a new mum, and it can just be impossible. But thinking about how can you get enough sleep and quality sleep. So a few things like making sure that you don't have any harsh lights or TVs before bed, which can be really hard, but just thinking about it, like maybe dim the lights a bit. I've got an app on my laptop which changes the color of the screen. Do you have that?
Yeah.
I think it's called f.lux or flux. So anyway, it mimics the natural light outside. So as it's getting darker, my laptop goes a different color, so it's not so straining and doesn't keep me awake. So just little things that you can do to assist your sleep. Trying not to be on your phone as much before you go to sleep, and just working on that quality.
They say like an hour before bed with the phone.
They do. It can be really hard, because you might like to watch some Netflix before bed, but even just doing a few things like the app thing I have, or using the night mode on the iPhone. And so I like to focus on sleep first and foremost, and then nutrition is definitely up there, but also finding things that you enjoy. So you mentioned walking. If you love walking, try and walk 3 times a week, twice a week. If you don't like walking, well, then maybe don't use that as your exercise of choice. Like maybe find what you like. Is it yoga? Is it, I don't know, rollerblading? Whatever it is. So what can you do to help move your body in a positive way? And then once you've got the sleep and the bit of movement and you're feeling a bit better, then you might have motivation to eat a little bit better potentially. And then that's when it might start snowballing, and then you get to a point where you're just doing it out of habit and you're feeling good.
Yeah, and I think with exercise is exercise. You just do it because like you want to do it and you enjoy it. But I think with nutrition, like what we were saying earlier, it is a lifestyle and it is finding out what works for you. So it's not going to be, boom, in 6 weeks, I know exactly what I'm going to eat. There could be things that happen that change in your life and put you on a slightly different pathway of eating and experimenting and stuff like that.
Definitely. Like I'm always experimenting with my diet, and I'm never perfect, but I'm always progressing to be better. So I'm always trying to think about what I could do to make it still easy and enjoyable, but just tweaking it a little bit more.
So Claudia, for like your top tips of someone going out to a restaurant, like they're doing not sort of like a diet at home, but they're choosing better lifestyle choices with their food and moving and stuff like that. If they go out for dinner, what would be something like when you look at the menu, how do you choose something that would benefit you? Because there is lots, we're all social.
So there can be a few ways to think about that. Obviously, like it's just one meal and kind of enjoy it if you want to, allow yourself to enjoy that meal. But then if you do want to make healthier choices, I like to look at the preparation methods, I guess. So let's say it is let's say protein or a meat of choice, you would rather go for a steamed or a poached as opposed to like a fried or crumbed. So there's sort of little things that you can look at just to start bringing down the calories, because they're quite energy dense if you have something that's coated in something and then deep fried. You might like to look for some vegetables. So for instance, if my go-tos are probably Thai or Indian. So with a Thai, I would look for more of a stir fry. So not so much a creamy sauce, but more of like a soy base. And then it's got some protein in there and some vegetables. And then I might have some coconut rice, like maybe half a cup to 3/4 of a cup, just not overdoing it, but still feeling full and feeling good. And then probably my biggest one would be but just reduce like the entrees and the bread plates and the spring rolls and that sort of stuff. Like if you can, you could just have a main meal and enjoy that, maybe a small dessert, but you don't need to have all the extras and everything else with it.
And do you think that rolls into like mindful eating, like as in when you're feeling full, you don't have to finish what's on your plate?
Yeah, that's really hard. And I definitely struggled with that when I was younger personally, because when you're purchasing things and you feel like you need to eat that because you've paid for it and you're getting your value for money and just that sort of stuff. But when you realize that, okay, the food's not going to run out. So it's about me just, am I satisfied with that? Do I feel good? Do I feel, 80% full? Am I not too overdone? And that's probably enough. So you don't need to gorge yourself on everything and then feel really terrible, because then you'll more than likely not punish yourself, but you might feel like you're guilty about it. Yeah. So it can be hard to get your head around that. But once you just think about, okay, I'm going to enjoy this meal. I might have a few of this, but then tomorrow I'm going back to my walk in the morning and I'm going to have my normal routine in the morning and I'm going to be okay. Because it's not going to ruin you to have one off meal, and it's not going to change your physique if you're just having that one. So it's just about how can I enjoy it but still feel good.
And do you think that eating slower is better for you? Because I am a fast eater, and I don't know if that's just from hairdressing, because you're like, oh my God, I've got 2 minutes and you just huff, like you don't even taste the food. But over the years, I've tried to slow down my eating, and I noticed that when I am conscious of it and I'm thinking about it, and I sort of space it out a little bit more and at a dinner table, I do feel fuller.
Definitely. So I sat in with a session with a psychologist once, and it was really interesting because they talked about mindful eating, and even I was like, oh, I don't know if this experiment's going to work, but they sort of got us to get I think it was a grape or whatever. And we looked at the grape and then thought about a few things and described it, and then we like slowly ate it. And it was so weird because it wasn't like I was full, but it was just a really different way of thinking about it, as opposed to like shoving it down and not thinking about what you're actually eating. You just take your time, do it a little bit slower, sort of think about it. And then we know that there's hormones in the body that take a while to know that you are full. So they say, wait about 20 minutes and have a glass of water. And are you actually hungry, or are you just mentally wanting some more, or are you physically hungry? So it can be hard to distinguish, because obviously food can be amazing and you might think, oh, that looks so good, and it might be a little bit sweeter. But even just slowing down, okay, just chill for a second, have a glass of water, and then the food will be there if I want more food, but just think about it. How am I going to feel? That sort of stuff.
And for someone trying to lose weight, like, because we know that like when you are trying to lose weight, you need to sort of hone in on how much food that you are having. Do you recommend that like, let's say you are eating slower and you're appreciating your food, but you just feel like that block of chocolate?
Yeah.
What do you recommend for people? Like, because you don't want to say no. My rule is you don't want to say no to yourself, because as soon as you say no, there will come a time where you're going to rebound and you'll binge and you'll freaking eat. And like, I'm only going to speak from experience. And so what do you recommend for people when they are in that situation and they're trying to work towards their body composition, and they are just like, like they're not an athlete?
It can be a difficult one. I think from personal experience, I removed all restrictions. So back when I said...
Do you mean like in the household? Like out of the...
or as in like mentally. So I would never say, oh, I can't eat chocolate ever again because I'm on a diet. Like I would say, okay, if you feel like some chocolate, that's cool. Have a row or whatever it is, but move on. Like because once you say, I can't have it, and then you might hide it in the fridge, and then eventually you're going to think about it all day. And then because you've been thinking about it, you're going to go in, have one, go have two more. And then you just, you know, you're thinking, I can't have it, but you will. So then you might have the whole thing. So I like to have, well, I guess good quality. So I have a good quality chocolate, and then I always can have it when I feel like it, just every now and then. But it's about not feeling guilty about it, not having any restrictions, because then you will eventually get hungry at some point and you'll go and eat the whole thing, and then you'll be like, why did I do that? I'm so naughty or whatever.
Yeah.
You feel terrible about it.
Yeah. And do you recommend that people like for clients, I say to them, like, look, if this is your goal and you're trying to, obviously everyone wants their body like this. Yeah. They want as quick as possible. So I say to them, okay, like, yes, I do say pick better options, but sometimes I think it's best when you can eliminate that completely out of your everyday vision. So like as in like in the household, like I know that you're not going to eliminate it when you go out for like a lunch and you see these things that you might like, but I mean just as the everyday what you see, would you recommend that, or would you recommend still have some sort?
I would recommend to have a healthier option. So if you can make it yourself. So I like to make homemade brownies or homemade cookies or whatever it is. And so I'm still having that, but I know it's much better because I've made it. I know what's in it. I know that it's not as energy or calorie dense as something that I would have bought. So personally, I wouldn't say that I eat like many like cakes and things like that, but I'm always eating homemade cakes and homemade things. So they're healthier options. They've got a little bit more fiber in them. They've got maybe some sneaky veggies in there or something like.
But they always taste amazing.
Yeah, but they're always so good. I would never eat something that doesn't taste good. So it's about it can be hard, but I like to just make sure I have these things that are a little bit better and in the household and no restrictions on them. So every day I might have, 2 cookies with this and then a homemade slice in the afternoon or whatever. But it's about how you can stay consistent. And then if you are going out for a social event, having a dessert that's on the menu is fine, but it wouldn't be an everyday thing. Yeah.
So how do you know, like, because I'm only asking this question because I've seen it, like, how do you know when's enough? Like when you said, oh, I have 2 cookies and you're like, okay, would you recommend that having like these sorts of treats and after your meal, or like when would you recommend to have this food? Because I know if I'm going to taste something delicious in the morning around 10 o'clock, I'm going to want it again and I'm going to then I'll have lunch and then I'm like, maybe at 4 o'clock I'll have that again.
Yeah.
Like when's a healthy time to have something like that? Or is it up to the individual?
It's very up to the individual. I think if you're more of a sweet tooth, you might have it in the morning and then think about it all day. Or like, let's say you haven't let yourself have it, you're thinking about it all day till dinner. It's really how you can not feel guilty about it, but still enjoy it. So for myself personally, I might have it with a cup of tea in like after dinner, because I like that little bit of a sweet post-dinner thing. Whereas you might like to have it, let's say you had it before a workout. That could be a really good thing because it might be a little bit higher in sugar and then you can use that energy in your workout. So it's sort of finding a time that works for you that, you can use.
And do you think a lot of reasons we have obesity and stuff like that is from the nutrition, or do you think it's from lack of knowledge or
I think it's many things, because obviously that's the $1 million question. Everyone's trying to figure out how to combat or assist with obesity. But personally, I think we've just got so much availability of, let's say, fast food and energy dense food. So I could go out to a takeaway place and have whatever it is, and that could be 1,000 calories, and I'm only trying to have 2,000 in a day or whatever that is. And it's not registering that it's 1,000 calories because it might be not as nutrient dense. It might be made with things that are more calorie dense and don't make us feel as full, like no fiber, no plant-based matter or plant-based foods. So things are creeping in and we're not registering them maybe so much. And then what else are we doing? Are we having juices and soft drinks? And there's just so much food out there. Like when I walk through the Brisbane Mall, like it's just everywhere. And if you're not careful about it, you could try everything and eat everything, and it creeps up slowly. So I think one of the biggest things I did when I was looking at my own diet was not so much just not having anything, but I was just being really aware of there is so much food out there and we're always being advertised to try this. It's on the TV, it's on the internet, but just trying to not avoid it, but just be really wary that they are a bit more energy dense, and you could make a healthier option at home.
And what's your advice on alcohol?
Personally, I don't drink just because I'm trying to optimize my diet and my gut, and I drink rarely. Why
do you think that affects that?
Because I don't think I need it in my diet. Like I feel like I'm a fun gal. No, I'm joking. No, but I feel like I don't need it to have a good time. And
have you read anything that's made you feel like, oh, I don't want that? Or
no, I just think that from drinking when I was younger and drinking on the weekends, and I just felt terrible. Like you'd be out late and then it all snowballs, and then you might eat McDonald's and whatever it is, and you might feel just not as good. And I just felt that over time I stopped partying as much, and obviously don't go out as much anymore. And I just don't need it. And I feel like I don't need to have a good time, and I don't need that extra toxins in my body, which isn't to say that people shouldn't do it, but just being wary that, it is a toxin in the body. The liver does think of it as a toxin and it's trying to get rid of it. But if you like to drink, a wine with dinner, it can be good, can be full of antioxidants. Just the binge drinking sometimes can get a little bit excessive because it's a toxin on the liver and it's having to work a little bit harder. And then also, what are you having with the alcohol? So it's not to say the alcohol is the worst, but are you going out and having 2 pizzas and then going out for a kebab or stuff like that?
Yeah, I always had an extra meal.
Yeah. So it just can add up, and then you might get no sleep because you've been out partying. And each to their own. I personally don't do it, and I feel good. But if you do, I recommend just being aware of how much you're having, or choosing better options. So like probably not a vodka Red Bull, which has caffeine in it. Maybe like a vodka lemon soda, or a lower carb beer, or a nice wine, and just enjoying it. And thinking about it, because it's obviously a part of society. And if you do like it, have it in moderation, but also make sure you have some alcohol-free days just to give yourself a bit of a break, so you're not having it every day.
Yeah, I agree. And observe, like you said, how you're feeling, and is this actually benefiting me? Because there's so many options out there that you can have it as an alternative that isn't even alcoholic.
Yeah.
And you could be just having as fun a time. I think a lot of people don't realize they are quite funny without the alcohol.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. And Elise and I have put a challenge out to ourselves. We decided we weren't going to drink alcohol for a year.
For a year?
Yeah.
You've started this year?
Yeah, we've started.
How are you going?
I feel great. And the reason why we decided to was because we wanted to see what happens inside the body. And I noticed myself that the sneaky calories increased when I had lots of alcohol. As soon as I cut the alcohol, boom, my weight went down. And I was like, oh my God, okay. And then I started reading about like the health professions in the world, like the people that I idolize, they don't drink. I was like, there has to be something to that. So we put a test out there to see.
That's a really good goal, a whole year.
Yeah. Well, you did it.
So. Oh yeah, I do it. So I only drink on occasions if I need to, but I don't know. I don't feel like I just need to do it all the time. Yeah.
I love the enjoyment of that, of having a drink, but I notice the next day, it's not that I feel yuck. It's just that I'm not optimal. Like I'm not like, woo, let's go everyone.
I'm so energized.
Yeah. It's more like, oh, I have to go do this or something like that. So we put that test out there. So if you want to try it, guys, let us know, and then we can definitely help assist you on the hard days. That's for sure.
Yeah, because it's not easy. Like it's obviously all around us, and if you go out for a social occasion, people might look at you a bit weird, but they get over it. It's it's what do you want to do for yourself? Like I don't really care what people, if they think I'm a bit weird for not drinking. Like I enjoy not doing it and still having a dance.
The funny thing is that when you're known as the one that doesn't do it, and then it comes to a point where you're like, oh, I do want to have a drink. They're like, oh,
I know, it's
you weirdo.
They're
why?
Like, my family call me a stiff sometimes. They're like, come on, have a drink. I'm like, wouldn't you want me to not drink?
That's hilarious.
Yeah, you do have to be the designated driver most of the time, but I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I think taking control of your situation and your health is
each to their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been so lovely having you on the podcast, Claudia. Do you have any last words for the guests, and how can they get in contact with you? Because even if you are an athlete or anybody out there trying to improve your health, we'd love to know how we can reach out to you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It's been really nice speaking to you. Very informative. To best contact me would be through Instagram, so CC Dietitian, or through my Facebook, Claudia Cramer Dietitian, or additionally just my email is claudiacramerdietitian@gmail.com. So I'm usually across most of those, so shoot me a message. I'm not scary. If you need some help, or if I can help you to find someone who can help you, I'm always up for it.
Yeah, nice. And do you have YouTube?
I do. I am at that point where I love filming content, but I don't like editing. I was talking to Elise about this before, so I need an editor. No, I love it. I love YouTube and watching YouTube content, but at the moment it's not my focus. But it should be soon, because I love doing like cooking videos and just silly stuff. But
yeah, and people love watching.
Yeah, I know. I really do enjoy it, but I think it's my next thing to focus more on and just do some more recipes and get some more videos out there.
To be continued.
To be continued.
All right. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks for listening in, guys. If you're on Apple, please leave a 5-star written review. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. All right. I'll see you next week with the next inspiring story.